Well, hello everyone. This is very exciting for me to be here. I'm a long-time student over the last 2.5 years, first-time visitor. So a little thing with the pandemic has kept me from being on campus. So it's fabulous to see the setup and to meet my supervisors for the very first time. So in the flesh, we've spent lots of time online. So thank you very much for both of you for being here. My name is Kelly Humphrey and I am a Gomeroi woman. I've joined you today from the lands of the Wiradjuri people where I live and work, and that's in the bottom half of the state in the Wagga Wagga area. I am really nervous to present to you today, so I'm just going to put that out there. You'll hear the shake in my voice, and you'll probably see my face go red. Hopefully not, because I did pack on makeup today, just so that could cover it. But I do want to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Yugambeh people, who have long before us lived, loved, raised and continue to educate their children themselves on this very land. It's with deep esteem and respect that I acknowledge the elders from the time before, from this current time, and the time that will be. I acknowledge my own ancestors who have walked a very long journey before me, but has actually allowed me to be here today. So who am I? Well, I come to this research as an Aboriginal woman. I'm a mother of 2 beautiful girls. I'm a wife to a wonderful husband who has jury duty today. So thank God I'm a daughter to my mother and father who have my children to look after this week. And I'm an educator. I come to this research from a position of privilege. My mum and dad pushed us to have a little bit more than they did in their lifetime. They wanted us to be kids who could see things from different perspectives and experience the world in different ways. My mum grew up, we were both born, mum and I, in Moree, and she grew up in that town with a family and experienced a lot of domestic violence and alcoholism. Her education finished, formal education finished at the end of year 7. She didn't progress any further. My father is a working class man, he's a tradie. Big shout out to anyone who's married to a tradie. Mum would say she never gets anything done at home. But he had a trade qualification and came from a fairly middle class sort of background. But both my parents make a powerful team because they've pushed each other along the way, and all throughout my growing up, they managed to achieve other certificate level and diploma courses, which sort of set us up for a lifelong learning. I spent most of my schooling time in northern New South Wales, and I'm really proud to say I'm the very first grandchild of 52 to receive a tertiary education. I have about 4 chasing my tail, 2 completed and 2 coming along the way, but I am still the first person who has a postgraduate qualification, and hopefully not the only one who'll go on to higher research degrees. So I'm privileged and to be supported by my family to be here today and to pursue this doctoral research along with working full time. So look, the picture that you see on the screen here is of real significance. It was taken during a weaving circle in Brungle in Shumat, so that's just outside of Wagga Wagga, if anyone knows, about an hour up the Snowy Mountains, very cold country. All the hands you see here are Aboriginal women who are learning and practicing the cultural art of basket weaving. The women all sat in a circle this day and they yarned and they laughed and they shared stories and they created these baskets. And as they walked away at the end of this day, they took the physical representation of these baskets containing their stories and their memory of this sacred time. And I have to acknowledge Harriet Goodall for the photo here. And the artwork that you'll see throughout the presentation is that of my mother's. But look, I'm back in Queensland, it's very exciting. I left here about 12 years ago, so it's very exciting to be back. And I wanted to share with you one of the poems that inspires me from Oodgeroo of the New Knuckle. Some of you may know her as Kath Walker. And this poem, I'm going to share a little bit with you, but if you get a chance, have a go. It's called The Song of Hope. And it was written in the 1960s, and if you know anything about our black history here in Australia, you'll know that that was a pretty tumultuous time for Australia. We were criticised internationally about our care and concern for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It led to a referendum and things called freedom rides. And Ujuru wrote this because she had seen a different perspective, a softening, I guess, of the way in which Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were being treated. So her poem, The Song of Hope, starts with 2 lines: "Look up, my people, the dawn is breaking." And I wanted to share this with you because even though it was written in 1960s, it's very relevant for me as an Aboriginal student in a HDR program. I think for me, and finding my confidence over the last 2.5 years, these 2 lines speak to me. Look up, my people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, look up. Hold your head high. You belong here in this space. You are to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued for what you bring, your culture, your ways of knowing, your ways of doing, that can enhance this thing called the academy. The dawn is breaking. The light is shining. It's shining a pathway, illuminating our ways of knowing, being, and doing to be celebrated in this research space. And it's here I have to acknowledge those who have come before me and still continue to walk this path, and very much my supervisors, both Lexi and Stuart, for their contribution, because they've been with me and I've been challenged along the way. Oh, it's going, sorry. This one. Challenged along the way in this professional doctorate. I felt completely out of space, out of step, like I don't belong. I have struggled to navigate the higher degree area, being online in the middle of a pandemic, and then sometimes thinking, what have I got myself in for? It was particularly relevant when I started to explore theory and what that looked like for me in the research that I was hoping to achieve. It was at that point that I realised, with the help of Lexi and Stuart pushing me to find something that made sense to me, and doing some reading of Yunka Porter and Shillingsworth, that I had to make it make sense. So, long story short, you can see my research question on the screen. I intend to elicit the barriers and enablers for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander teachers who perhaps aspire to a school leadership position. So I want to really find out why they're not getting there or why they are getting there. But I don't want to talk too much about that today. I want to talk to you about the theoretical framing in this study. And if you haven't guessed through the imagery and the little explanations in the beginning, that framework is through basket weaving. So there are 5 elements to weave a basket. And this theory connects paradigms, spans Indigenous research and Indigenous standpoint theory, decolonising methodologies, and post-qualitative research through the cultural practice of basket weaving. I'm using Indigenous standpoint theory because it exposes how Aboriginal people are placed in the constructs of colonial knowledge, and it investigates those power relationships from a marginalised perspective. And while it values the group, it does not do so at the expense of individuals. So Todd in 2006 forewarned that personal paradigm shifts have a way of sneaking up on you, and I think this one came and slapped me in the face. My shift happened one day, Sunday afternoon, up for a cup of tea with Mum, and I took a few stacks of journal articles I'd hoped to get through and read. And I'm sitting in her couch with my cup of tea reading the work of Engstrom, who coined the term not working, and that's the tying and untying and retying of threads of activity. And I thought, gee, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work out a way I can stitch all these paradigms together to make it make sense. And then I look over at my mother, and here she is, pulling threads through, knotting fibres together, connecting them, joining more. And at this moment, I knew straight away that that was my paradigm shift. This was the theory in which my research would be explored. And I wanted to show you this table in particular, just to show you how I conceptualised my thinking across the way. But I am going to dive a little bit deeper into the framework so you can have a good look. I live with a graphic designer and an IT person. I mentioned my dad being a tradie and Mum always saying she never got anything done around the house. It's the same at my place. I've done this. It's a little bit hard to read at times. I am still waiting for my graphic designer husband to create me a beautiful version, which will hopefully, make its way into the book somewhere. My mother talks of 5 elements to weave a basket, and these are the core, the grasses, the hands, the mind, and the needle. So this framework is the best way that I can explain the complexities and the challenges of this research situated in Aboriginal ways of knowing, doing and being. And it's my way of capturing these personal stories through decolonising methods of Western paradigms. So at the core of a basket is something firm. Nowadays we might use a paper core. Traditionally we might use a whole stack of grasses pulled together, but that core is its strength. At the core of Indigenous standpoint theory is the need to address inequality, also its strength. This research aims to explore respectfully the current stories of aspiring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander teachers for retention and career progression in school leadership. If I use the Western term, the axiology of this research is ethically situated in the critical transformative paradigm. And Yunka, Porter and Shillingsworth said, when you're working with an Indigenous paradigm, trying to make things connect, use a cultural metaphor, which is what we're doing today. So I am weaving the basket in this framework. It'll never be the reality without the connection to relationships with each element and how I understand my world and my way of being. 3 minutes. Oh, 3 minutes to go. Right, let's go quick. The grasses is the ontology. The grass is used to weave around the core and it's harvested from the earth. The earth has nourished these grasses from tiny little seeds, and my mother's hands picks the grasses, only what she needs to create a basket, and when it's no longer required, it's returned to the earth to nourish new growth. What exists here is a relationship between the land and the grasses and the hands. And Wilson explains that Indigenous ways of knowing are constructed out of relationships. My ontology is relational and born of connection. The hands are our doing, right? They're our methods that we're going to use. And this framework uses Aboriginal storying and yarning as ways of being and doing. Our hands are the instruments that will conduct the process, and the hands in this theoretical framework are the methodology. So my knowledge of weaving has been developed by watching and experiencing and doing, and knowledge can be learnt in context, as we know. It's generated through experiences and connections. My way of knowing is dependent upon the social, political, the historical and experiences that I have had through and with others. So Wilson also explores ways of knowing as how we come to know something. So when weaving a basket, reflections, questions, stories, yarns all build my understanding. Knowledge is made through an intricate web of relationship, creating with the hands. And the final element is the needle. The needle in this theoretical framework pulls and stitches all these concepts together. It pulls together the paradigms, the theories of Indigenous, post-structural inquiry and critical transformative paradigms. The metal needle is a relatively new tool. Traditionally, it may not have even required a needle, or it might have been something a bit more natural. So metaphorically, the metal needle is a new way of doing something. It's a new way of doing research informed by an Indigenous worldview. So critical transformation theories look at the injustices of the marginalised, and post-qualitative research is research that makes it relevant to engaging the challenges of the contemporary world. So the needle here actually pulls together this study entangled in paradigms that promote people to think, act and do things differently. So I wanted to just go back as I finished today and just read a little bit more of that poem by Oodgeroo Noonuccal. And using a cultural metaphor has provided a way to progress my understanding of theory as an Aboriginal researcher, to lift the restriction and the boundaries that I felt in having to find a framework or a theory that just fit what I was trying to do. So I'll share the next few lines of the poem with you, and as I do, I hope you're reflecting on the journey I've just taken you on in using a cultural metaphor as an Aboriginal researcher in a postdoctorate study. Oh, sorry, not postdoctorate, what was it? Thank you, poststructural, thank you. So look up, my people, the dawn is breaking, the world is waking to a bright new day where none defame us and no restrictions tame us. So thank you for listening today. Sorry, I'm moving a bit over. Thank you.
Tell me, has your mum passed on to you her basket weaving skills?
Yes, I'm not as good though. I am trying really hard because once I've done my work with my participants, I will be creating baskets for them as a thank you. So it'll be a bit of a process. So I am still learning.
Good.
Yeah.
Aren't we always? Does anybody have any questions for Kelly about her early stages of her research?
Yeah, so I'm looking for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander teachers who have perhaps somewhat mastered their craft and aspire to be school leaders. So that 3 to 5 year area after entering teaching, or early retired or recently left the profession, people to get a really good grasp on that. I'm looking across the systems. So in New South Wales, we have the Independent Catholic and the department. So there'll be participants from each of those and a small cohort. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh.
Excuse me. Have you published a paper on the theoretical work?
Yeah, it's coming. It's in the pipeline. It's being tidied and looked at now, so it won't be long. I'll be publishing with my supervisors. Yeah.
I would love to read it.
Yeah, thank you. You might be the only one, so that's really exciting for me to hear. Thank you.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Perhaps when the paper's published and distributed.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Katie?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I remember talking to you about this in the very early stages,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to share that was incredibly powerful and well articulated.
Oh, thank you, Katie. That means a lot coming from you.
I'm so excited to see
Yes.
all the fruits of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, no, thank you for your wise words in the very early stages too. I really appreciate the time you took.
Excellent PowerPoint, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you.
It was lovely.
Thanks. I'll just have to get better at my clicking skills.
No,
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Kelly.